Ladies and gentlemen, let me now welcome our panelists this evening. Suyash from Purplle joining in, also Kirti Patil from Kotak Life Insurance, and Abhinav Sinha from OYO. Thank you all for joining in and being a part of this evening with us. Suyash, let me begin with you. And we were talking about artificial intelligence and how we can really put it to use at our workplaces. How about you begin by talking to us about how you've integrated AI into operations at Purplle?
Right. So I think there are many ways in which the advancements of today's can be implemented. And there are many ways in which we have implemented it at Purplle. I think the first and the foremost thing to understand is about a little bit about Purplle. We run a beauty company and we have multi-channel distribution like e-commerce, offline, distributing beauty brands across India. We have about 10 warehouses, more than 10,000 distribution points. And when you're looking at these kind of numbers for operations, inventory planning and forecasting becomes one big challenge. And I think then that is one area which has really been transformed with all the new age technology which is available, which is inventory forecasting. I think what has also been very important is how do you decide what courier partner to use to ensure that the delivery happens to the customer in the fastest amount of time. We have been able to do a lot of good work when it comes to ensuring that the goods to the customer get delivered in the fastest amount of time. But in general, I think the way we are approaching it in operations particularly is there are a bunch of decisions that humans have to take. And how can AI and machine learning help you automate a lot of that decision science by using these advanced models so that the decisions can be minimized or the human impact can be minimized in that.
And I will talk to you about that and of course how we can bring in efficiency as well. But before I go to Kirti, I'm going to take a question with you, Abhinav. For a cloud native firm like OYO, talk to us about apart from of course consumer engagement that you told me about, and also writing content and how you're creating a marketing buzz for a lot of your OYO properties through AI. What else are you putting AI to do for you guys at OYO?
Thank you for having me here first. It's a great question. If you see broadly in the industry today, there are 3 or 4 specific areas where AI is already running at the forefront from an applications perspective. You rightly mentioned customer engagement is one. The creative part is the other one. So this is a very large part where, especially being in the travel industry, we have a huge set of opportunities. So we believe we are just dabbling at the very surface now. It's not just creating content for the consumer directly, but even the entire process of how you create content, how you audit and do the quality control there. That entire creative part is something where the world is our oyster and we have to really figure out what else we can do. But this is one area where we are very, very focused. Overall, we do believe that anything where creative work is at the forefront, those dimensions are opening up much faster and in a more creative way than the creative dimensions that were available earlier. Those are exploding. So how you basically use your current knowledge workers on top of AI is something which is a huge consideration for all leadership teams, especially in the creative space. From a R&D perspective, the ability to run experiments is really something which is accelerating and going to the next level. So think about on our platform, we because most of our distribution is through our app. Personalization and then pricing. So a lot of this is dynamic for every individual based on time of day and the channel you're coming from and your past behavior. A lot of this, the type of experiments we can do and how fast we can learn and therefore take it forward, we are seeing this is becoming better and better. Whereas still we would say that generative AI is still something which you are, really not using to its full potential.
And we're going to be talking about that in a while, but I'm going to take a question with Kirti. Kirti, insurance is a much more traditional sector. How do you get AI, which is a completely new disruptive technology, to work for the insurance, for the BFSI sector?
Thank you for having me here, Ruchi, and it's a great question. Yes, it's a very traditional business. I think it's the oldest business, perhaps. When we started our transformation journey about 5 or 6 years ago, naturally we said, which is the area that we really want to transform? And we said, we want to transform the area of customer engagement and customer experience. And when we were looking at all areas that we could transform, we said, if we have to transform the customer experience, then why not look at conversational AI? So our AI journey really started with conversational AI. And that was before the pandemic. And while Siddesh spoke about digital labor, and we treat our conversational AI bots like our employees. The mundane work is done by them. The better work is done by actual human beings. But it still took time for customers to adopt. And then we were hit by the pandemic, and we all know what happened to the digital transformation. It just exploded. So that was the first use case. The second one was, we are in the business of risk-taking. And we wanted to use data and AI to actually identify frauds, do risk assessment, help our underwriters to take better decisions. So that was the second area that we worked on. We built some ML models there, and they have been running for quite some time. The third one was predictive analytics in customer behavior. So what is the customer behavior when it comes to lapses? What is the customer behavior when it comes to payments? And we are using AI models there to help us strategize how do we engage with our customers. What do we do so that we are able to retain them, we are able to cross-sell, upsell to them? That's the third area. The fourth area, I think that is the closest to my heart. We were working with, while we are a very traditional industry, traditional organization, we work with all the new age organizations. And we identified a great use case. And I'll just take a moment to explain the problem that we had. So we sell annuity products like pension. And as a part of that, every customer has to every year declare that, hey, I am alive. Only if the customer is alive, we will pay the annuity that is due to be paid to her. And customers, mostly senior citizens, would have to come to a branch, fill in a form and say, hey, I'm alive. And then we came across a use case to use AI to identify the liveliness of a person. So all that the customer has to do is click a selfie and send it to us. And we run an algorithm which checks two things. One is whether the selfie belongs to that customer and whether it is a selfie which was taken now. And we are able to conclude whether the customer is alive or not. And that is the best use case. It has been live for a very long time. And I think that's close to my heart.
And such a simple solution to such a, I would say, a complex issue, a complex problem.
Absolutely. And let me tell you what next, okay? Face recognition is being used in this case or so many other cases, but we are seeing very good use cases in doing primary health analysis. What is the health of a customer? Smoker, non-smoker. And I think the next game changer will be in medtech. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, absolutely. And while we're talking about the use cases, Suyash, I want to talk to you about how do you really identify the right use case? I mean, talk to us about the experience that you had in your own firm, and of course the acceptability of your team as well towards AI and the technology that of course comes with it.
No, I think great question. This is probably one of the times that we are living in when probably technology can be used to solve pretty much everything, right? Now, when that is the case, ideas come flying from every place. But I think what we need to do as leaders in the firm is stay true to what you are trying to solve for. What are your biggest, business problems that will really set you apart as a business, right? And will give you that sustainable advantage. There are, of course, things that you'll do to ensure that you're running the ship more efficiently and so on and so forth. And hence, for us, it was imperative that, we focused on something that we call today as a beauty intelligence suite. Now, what that suite does is it consumes millions of data points around tens of thousands of products globally, search trends, now YouTube videos, and it throws what products we should actually manufacture and launch. That actually has given us, a great pipeline of products that now are launched and then scaled to, multi-lakh units sales every month. And that is, one of the use cases that I'm extremely proud of. The second use case, which was a very big thing for us, is now that you create so many products, how do you create demand for it? Which is where the generative AI now is coming and helping us in a very big way. Where not only marketing briefs, but also idea generation, iteration on scripts, working with influencers, identifying the right influencers to work with or the right marketing briefs to work with. All of it is done, in a very fairly automated fashion, bits and pieces of generative AI used there as well. These are the big examples of the problem statements that we wanted to solve. Of course, when it comes to the team and acceptability of the team, there are always people who would, be either disbelievers that, no, this won't be able to do a better job. You need that human touch. And I think that is where, it is very important to make sure that you communicate it in a manner which is acceptable to them. So what we call internally at Purplle is an AI intern. So it is an intern created for a very fine-tuned for a very specific use case, which is available to that particular individual.
Right.
And that individual can now be much more powerful because of that particular intern being at their disposal.
In fact, it's very interesting that you pointed us to the direction of whether revenue generation can be done via AI. And, if you can talk to us, Abhinav, about what has your experience been at OYO, can revenue generation be done through AI, through generative AI as well?
Yeah, of course, generative AI still very early, but so promising, so promising. So if you think about the use cases, it's critical to first zoom in on really, the golden use cases which will create impact. Because otherwise, the use cases can be so broad that you lose a lot of time in experimentation. That said, however, the brightest of the minds believe in experimentation. So you do have to create enough leeway within the company where, some experimentation goes on.
Right.
Because as Suyash mentioned, you can have fascinating use cases actually coming out not from the golden use cases you thought about, but also from the experiments which you're doing. I will talk about one which is quite fascinating for us. For us, we are into vacation homes. This is a business primarily in Europe. And budget hotels, business primarily in India and Indonesia and Malaysia. So a lot of our vacation homes, the revenue that a vacation home generates, it depends upon the specific location, the features, the floor plan, so many different things. We have a physical field sales force which goes, meets the partners and onboards these vacation homes. Through all the data which is there with us, and more of machine learning than true generative AI, but you are able to now predict and guide your salespeople that if you onboard this home, this is the potential revenue that the company will generate. It makes for a very exciting pitch because it's very precise, and it also makes for more intelligent remuneration systems where you are basically giving incentives exactly the right way. And therefore, you are optimizing and getting the most out of the resource which is driving growth for you. And driving growth in terms of the number of vacation homes and therefore revenue, etc. So I think these are foundational changes in how the organizations run. I believe that new age companies like us, because we do not have too much history and therefore do not have too much baggage, it's actually very easy culturally to go through all this. So, you're pretty much cloud native companies and, you don't change too many things in 6 months is like very anxious as to, we are not seeing enough changes. So it flies very well, but it has to work for everyone.
Right.
So these are things where, for example, this is an example where the front field salesperson makes more money, they are more efficient, they contribute more to the company, and the company is better off as well.
Let me to, you, Kirti, is retrofitting a good idea? You see all these new age companies taking technology and experimenting so much, but for the BFSI sector, for the insurance sector, how easy or difficult is that change really?
I think change is difficult, but not impossible.
Right.
And I think what is important is what is the business problem. So if you have identified the right business problem and then found a technology solution, then the success is easy. Because we are at the end of the day not a technology company, right? So we will talk about AI, but we never say that I want to implement generative AI. I say I want to solve this problem. And if this problem can be solved by generative AI, so be it. If not, so be it. So the use case is absolutely very important. Now, that's one. Two is, we need to experiment. We may not be able to experiment as widely as maybe they can, but we do experiment. Third is that we do a lot of close user group testing, okay? So even before we go live, so that the idea is then tested live in production by the people who are going to use it.
Right.
And then when you see success, then it is easy to then make it
adopt.
mainstream.
Absolutely. So Yash, if I can ask you, are you asking your employees and also using AI for that matter to write codes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are tremendous tools now available for the engineering teams. I think the way people approach how to write applications has completely transformed now. So our engineering team actively uses, generative AI tools to ensure that they are able to be more efficient. A lot of things that we don't realize is that time went into research for figuring out last mile details of some specificities. Now that is completely cut down by the use of generative AI. It not only helps in the manual effort of not writing the code and it generates that, but a lot of the research work related to that is also cut down. It also ensures that there is proper linting and proper gatekeeping so that all the security checks, code reviews, based on your guardrails, based on your context can automatically happen. And hence, the developer productivity has at least improved by 50%.
Oh, well, that's an interesting number. Abhinav, talk to us about that. I mean, at OYO, are you guys using generative AI to use codes? Has it increased, general operational efficiencies and the efficiency of the team as well?
The answer is a very resounding yes. I think in this case, when you're dealing with developers, you asking them is absolutely not needed. They are at the forefront of exploring what's happening in the ecosystem, and they start doing it before, you take a formal call as a team to do this, right? And those are the front runners who start emerging with new ideas and new creative ways of using this. So if I can draw an analogy, I believe that over the next 2 to 3 years, the way in the world of investing, even before generative AI, a lot of active wealth management has moved and given way to passive investing, right? Which is basically using a lot of technology and will benefit further from generative AI. I believe that on similar lines, you will see a lot of active code writing will basically get replaced by passive code writing, where you need human oversight, right? Absolutely. You need people to give the right direction, to set the right context, to train the model the right way. But, a lot of the hard work will be done by, generative AI. So that's where, short-term gains, yes, I would say 30 to 50% efficiency at an individual level already there. Org-wide, these levels of efficiency will happen very soon over time, but the potential can be, multiple X from here on.
And while we're talking about that, Kirti, if I can come to you and ask you, how can tech be used more maturely for the insurance sector? I mean, if you can talk to us about how one can really evaluate risks in a more mature fashion using artificial intelligence.
See, for us, we are a regulated industry. So whenever we are using any AI and using it to take decisions, we actually absolutely need to have explainability, okay? Because our underwriters are not really going to accept a decision that is taken by a model. You see, this model was trained on this data and the accuracy is 95%. So you please accept the decision. It doesn't work that way for us. So we need to have transparency and clarity in the model. Okay, only then the belief in the automated model will come in. That's one. There are regulatory implications. So one also has to be cognizant of that. Third, privacy. Okay, so we need to take all these into consideration when we build anything using AI, so that it is accepted and it is a long-term decision which will not be questioned tomorrow by any of the stakeholders.
Right, Suyash, if I can, talk to you about how can one really devise artificial intelligence and automation projects that can deliver transformative versus a very generic kind of a change?
Right. I think as a business, you need to be clear what that transformative change for you means. Mm-hmm. It could be, adding a new revenue source for the company by adding a new, product line. It could mean, new ways of doing things and completely transforming the way processes are run. For example, say how customer support or customer delight works, right? You could deliver the same experience, but now without any manual intervention.
Right.
So the way historically, you traditionally approach a function, that can completely get transformed. So I think there are multiple ways in which what that transformative change could mean for an organization. I think we were very clear on certain aspects that we believed we need to be the best at. And that is why we ensured that we use technology to the right effect, because that we believe is in our DNA. We spent a lot of hard work in spite of now the technology being democratized, and that can't be your differentiator, but we still spent a lot of time in fine-tuning technology for our use case, and it is in general, now visible in the way we approach things. For example, each and every push notification that you receive from Purplle is an automated GPT-generated copy, which has been customized for you based on your browsing and your purchases. Each and every banner that you see on our website right now has been generated by generative AI. And I can urge all of you to open it up and see and install it see for yourself. These are all changes that come when you change the culture within the organization. So while as a company, as a leadership, we are trying to go after moonshots, and we are trying to ensure that, we ensure efficiency in other areas. But if you create that impact in the culture, then you really see transformation happens, and for each of the specific use cases, it will be different. But I think that is, for me, is very important.
Abhinav, if I can, come to you and if you can give us a sense of what would be the best way to balance the need for human oversight and what the technology is able to do and bring to the table.
I think there will be many dimensions, and it will be absolutely critical to have the balance that you're talking about. Some dimensions were already called out. You have to think about privacy, you have to think about plagiarism. So there are these dimensions which we do not really know in the world of generative AI, how are they going to be perceived. I think even the dimension of human oversight, how do you think about it, is going to change. For example, the power of generative AI will maybe, move towards people who really understand the organization culture, the priorities, and therefore what prompts to give to get the right results for your organization, right? And that itself, to me, it's not just human oversight. It's basically the ability to use generative AI the right way. And as Suyash was also saying, the capability is there, but culturally, how you move and stay ahead of the curve to really understand and harness those capabilities will need you to invest in really your people, the human oversight element, and also other capabilities as they evolve.
In fact, some of the questions are coming in virtually by all the people who are joining in as well. We're hearing a lot of positive stuff here, but things seem to be moving very fast. Kirti, if you can talk to us about if you have any concerns about the speed of transformation that you're witnessing.
I think the concern would be there if we are recklessly doing the transformation, okay? So you need to be fast, but you don't need to be reckless. If something is going to take time, it will take time. But so if you do transformation for the sake of transformation, then I would have a concern. But like I said, if you identify the business problem, choose the right technology, do your testing, then I don't think we should be worried about the pace.
All right, and as we look to close up, your closing thoughts, Suyash, on what advice would you have for other organizations that are looking to adopt AI in a much more transformational way, as we call it in this uncertain world?
I think 2-3 key points. One is definitely create a SWAT team or a small pod for innovation who can ensure that you as an organization are always abreast on whatever is happening, because things are changing very fast. In a matter of weeks, there is something or the other which is coming in. So that will be one advice, which is have a small board or a SWAT team. The second is identify use cases, which is we all talked about that as well. And the third is always ensure that there is some justification before attempting any project, because it is such a vast area where it is easy to just get lost into it. So if you exactly know that I am doing this to save cost or increase conversion, then you're able to make sense of what is the ROI for this, and hence for how long I can continue doing this. So these 3 areas, I think, are important.
Thank you, Suyash. Kirti, quickly, if you can help us understand for enterprise-wide AI adoption, what should companies focus in on?
I think we should be willing to challenge the status quo and the use case. Again, I'm coming back to the use case. Identify the business problem first and then the technology later.
Abhinav, on to you.
I'll just be very quick. 2 things for me. One, I think everyone should imagine a world where you have an unlimited source of post-MBA graduates. What would you do if you had that? So that's the problem statement to really use Gen AI in the future. And 2, I think the processes have to change, especially decision-making processes, because this question was very important. The speed at which generative AI will execute will be very different from the speed which work is happening now. So your ability to question, course correct, take preventive actions or corrective actions, all of that, the time will not be there. So how do you really brace up for that environment is going to be very different.
All right, a very, very interesting conversation. Kirti, Abhinav, Suyash, appreciate you all joining us here and talking to us about the use case scenario and how we can put artificial intelligence to work. Thank you very much. With that, it's a wrap, and I'm going to invite Jeanette back on the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.